Hey everyone, how are you doing? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you had a wonderful Easter and that you didn't get tricked too much on April 1st. Welcome to Midnight Hatter Live, the weekly variety show where we talk Gundam, gaming, and 3D printing now. Uh, I'm Steven, aka Midnight Hatter, your host, and joining me as always is the Gundam explainer, Adam Blue. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, pretty good. The April Fool's thing was funny because one, I forgot, and then two, I would see a headline article, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wow, that's interesting. Let me read this." And I'm like, "No, oh, it's April Fool's."
Yep.
Like it would take the ones though I don't like. It's when they're like a really good idea. Like let's say the U.S. government's like, "Hey, we're going to stop funding wars." April Fools. It's one of those where it's like, no, that shouldn't be a joke. That should be real.
Yeah, I don't like that you guys are being so flippant about this because I'm not. No, um, in the Gundam sphere, the one that always goes around on Instagram every year is the Master Grade Kshatriya box art, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, were there any other Gundam related ones?
I don't know. There must have been a few because I saw that Zionic Scans over on Twitter posted about like, hey, maybe let's not get excited about any Gundam news that's coming out today because obviously it's going to be a joke. And I was like, "You know what? I think that the other 364 days a year, you should probably just not get excited about Gundam news because either, it's gonna be 4 or 5 years out, like, with the Gundam live action movie,
Yeah.
or, it's gonna be a disappointment anyway. So you should only get excited about Gundam olds, not Gundam news."
Ooh, I like
I'll see
that.
myself out. That was a
No.
bad joke. But,
No, but that's
yeah, I see, a lot of the usual suspects in chat, Zeonic Shadow, we were just talking about you off stream, Ultronymous, Talos, Legion, good to see you
yeah.
guys, Johnny Tacoma, I am happy it feels like it's been months since I've been on stream, this is kinda weird, I feel like, man, it's j I don't know, maybe it was just a long weekend for me, but
Think
I
so.
don't know how you guys feel.
Yeah, long weekend. There we had some like special episodes, streams we were doing, so we didn't do our traditional where we just kind of like talk about whatever. Um,
Yeah,
Although there's more than just whatever on today's episode.
yeah, today I'm pretty excited because, related to this, I just restructured my Patreon to be more geared towards the 3D printing and gaming stuff than the tabletop stuff. I've got a video coming out soon that is going to kind of address some of that stuff, and so I'm really excited to get that one out. But I also released my first entry grade conversion kit 3D prints, and I got to tell you, uh, the engineering mastery that I have achieved with this, it's a Zakutu F2, right? And the 3D printed parts are designed to kind of fit together with the entry grade joints of the, RX-78. I haven't tested it with the La Gundam, but, theoretically speaking, it should work as just as well. It has, like, cutouts to make room for things like the pelvis and the skirt parts that kind of jut out from the, entry grade Gundam, but, like, so this is actually the solid chest piece on the interior, right? So theoretically, you could print this in like a black plastic, and then you have these side breastplates that slide over the clips where the shoulder connects. And so you could print those in green plastic so that then you have your Zaku 2 F2. And as you can see, there's the white interior. That's actually part of the entry grade Gundam, as well as the ball joint here. So, and you retain all of that range of motion. So I was just really pleased with how the whole thing turned out.
Yeah, you never know with these. You've done so many things, and sometimes it's like, oh, what more do or where do I go forward with this? But that's pretty promising. That would hype me up.
Yeah, yeah, and it took some there was some trial and error going on with, like, some of the fits, and so this is printed in Tech ABS-like, uh, resin,
Huh.
which I hadn't worked with before, and now that I've kind of worked out the kinks of, you know, how much I'm gonna have to worry about, like, swelling or, tolerances and things like that, I've nailed down, I think, the perfect amount of tolerance to build into my joints that fit together so that I can implant this, which if you guys recall, This is from a company called Tiny Circuits. They're out of Akron. I think it's out of Akron, Ohio, but, they manufacture these tiny little circuit boards that you can create cool little things like this, let's see if we can so this is a tiny video of Giran's speech from
Wow.
Mobile Suit Gundam that I was gonna embed in a diorama, and look, it's even got audio on it. I don't know, can you hear this?
Yeah. Takedown notice. No, I'm joking.
Yeah,
Dude,
right.
that is awesome. That opens up a whole other level of doing dioramas. Even if I wasn't needing to custom something, just having things set up and using those screens, that's
Yeah, I mean, and this one's a pretty, out of the box solution. You don't have to do a whole lot. This kit is about 60 bucks on their website, and it has like a little SD card and a converter so that you can actually put the SD card in your computer. You upload a video file to it, plug it in, and it's good to go. Um, so what I want to do with this is a couple of weeks ago, I think I shared this. Let me hop into the screen share view. This is a 3D model that I picked up over on Thingiverse. It is free. I should have posted a link to it so that you guys can download it as well. But it is a 3D model of the Gundam Mark II cockpit,
oh,
um, which they did a really good job, like kind of capturing that panoramic cockpit design from Zeta Gundam. And so
yeah.
my goal is to create the housing for this screen to go inside this kit here. Um, and so then I'm gonna be able to 3D print it, put a Camille action figure in it, and, we'll have some fun.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And are you still scaling for that 3.75 to 4 inch?
Yes. So that's a good question because honestly, I don't know. I remember that this was scaled incorrectly for that figure, but I think if we adjust the model here, we can we can always adjust it to be at the right scale later.
Okay, that is awesome. Yeah. Um, I yeah, this would be something that would totally be because I already have like my Amuro and the core fighter pilot. Although, wait a minute, wouldn't the core fighter cockpit be the same cockpit as the Gundam cockpit?
Theoretically,
It,
but what's funny is it's like I was thinking about this because when they announced that new real grade RX-78, did you happen to see how the core fighter is designed?
no, I'm gonna have to look that up.
This is one of the most fascinating things about it is that unlike, most of the Gundams that have core fighters built into them, it kind of messes with the articulation because you have this big blocky core fighter
Right.
that's occupying that entire waist space. So you really can't get the kind of like ab crunch and like side roll that you would normally get from, a high grade. But what's fascinating about this one is they actually designed the core fighter so that it kind of like snaps backwards into the core fighter so that you actually can get that ab crunch on the new real grade RX-78 too.
Oh, I'm
Fascinating.
looking at
I'm really impressed by that.
Yeah, I'm looking at GundamKidsCollection.com, and it actually is showing that where I guess that's the main thing I guess I didn't look at this before, but that's the main thing they're highlighting. They're actually showing where there's that joint on that. That is amazing. That's the type of stuff I wanna see because huge fan of that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and we talk about this, especially with the transforming suits like the Zeta and things like that, where if you want like a really good Zeta kit, then like get the high grades, get the ones that don't transform, or get a robot spirits
yeah.
because you're gonna get better posability and it's not gonna feel like a hand grenade. Any of these Zetas that they design that actually transform, they're miserable to play with, which I know sounds kind of goofy. I'm like, oh, I gotta play with my toys, but
But hey, we do that. Hey, because of that, X-Men 97, I've had these little guys on my desk because I'm just getting all into the X-Men zone. But yeah, these are like the same scale.
yeah.
Um, uh,
Speaking of X-Men '97, that's why I'm kind of rocking the Rogue. today.
Oh,
No, my hair's just always grown in that way. I'm like, "Oh,
that's
geez."
cool. No, that's cool though.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Rogue.
I'll pick up a Southern accent here sooner or later.
No, that's actually the nickname I will use every once in a while is Rogue. Every once in a while, I'll just yeah.
Yeah, just sneak it in there. So, yeah, today we are going to be playing with my favorite toy, which is the
Ooh,
fancy digital micrometer. We're going to get some measurements on this screen, and we're going to figure out how to build this housing. Now, I want to make it as functional as possible, especially now I'm a little bit ambitious from having made a successful conversion kit. So I'm like, can I design this in such a way that I'm going to be able to remove the screen when I need to recharge the battery or if I want to change the video on it? The problem is, we have some engineering challenges that we're going to have to deal with. We have the pause and play buttons are actually on the sides of the device, which means that I'm going to need access to those sides in order to, actually start the video once it's installed. um, the SD card is on the bottom, which means, do we create like a little SD slot somewhere down here underneath the screen? Um, Additionally, we've got this big chunky lithium battery that has to fit in here somehow. And then, of course, the sound unit, which, you know, what I'm thinking is I'll probably create like a custom little video to put on here. And, it'll just be you guys saw in the thumbnail, I had, like, the screen from, Zeta Gundam: A New Translation. It has, like, the
oh yeah.
biosensor going off and, like, all
Oh,
of the instruments glitching out. I wanna try and recreate that video in high def for this, and then maybe put in, like, the Zeta theme, like,
yeah. Which one though?
I'm thinking the original Japanese. What do you think?
Yeah, I that probably lends better to a little display. I mean, actually, the other one would too, but that would be more of like a diorama.
Maybe we'll make a whole playlist. I'll do,
Oh,
like
there you go. Okay, I wanna bring up something, and I
yeah,
don't know if this is going too far into a direction you don't wanna go into, but I have been doing a lot of tinkering the past couple weeks with, like, Raspberry Pi, using command line
I do
to,
love
like
tinkering.
yeah,
I like
so
where this is going
I
already.
wonder if you build some sort of and it could be a Raspberry Pi, that way you can interface with it and maybe do things so one, you talked about battery, and I'm thinking, "Okay, well, you already came up with a solution for the battery, the wireless thing." I don't know if
Yeah.
it can power that, but the other thing would be then the Raspberry Pi, because then you can wirelessly, in fact, maybe, or even with single little wires yeah, the Raspberry Pi can be the base, and then you can even, yeah, make it where there's LEDs throughout,
See,
different
now you're talking. I love the idea of wiring this thing up with some LEDs and getting some
yeah,
more, you know, I really think that this is gonna be just like an awesome little diorama piece, and
yeah.
because the base is so large, I can probably fit one of the things, like with the battery, I'm already planning on cutting these wires and extending out the length of the battery so that, I can tuck the battery in the bottom, as opposed to having to find room for it up top. But yeah, fitting in LEDs and maybe moving the charging port from like the charging port for the battery currently is on the top of the screen, which
Oh.
is kind of inconvenient.
What
Like
would
I said,
stop? Couldn't you
the
flip the video
design of this
around?
is difficult because it's like there's important components on on all 4 sides, so there's really
Oh,
nowhere to kind of, like, rest it.
I see. Yeah, or, like, going back to the Raspberry Pi idea where everything's done via command line.
Yeah, doing that, I mean, what's awesome is that this company, Tiny Circuits, actually makes, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, shields
Oh,
that you can connect to it. So, like so
wow.
theoretically, I could even control the thing from my phone.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, now we're speaking, and that and I've been getting into, like, playing ROMs on anything possible. Make it where that thing can load up some, Gundam ROMs you, like, play on a tiny screen.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, see, I think you would love this company, Tiny Circuits. They actually have what they call, like, the tiny arcade. Well,
Oh,
they have 2 gaming platforms. Sorry, my voice is going today because of this cough that I've had going. But, they have 2 game devices. One is called the Thummy, which is kind of like a miniature Game Boy that uses the screen, and the other one is the Tiny Arcade, which is like a tiny arcade cabinet with this screen in it. Um, I think that
wow, I'm
they
looking
come
at it right
loaded with,
now.
like, 30 games on them, and
That
of course,
is
you can actually design games for them and upload them via SD card, so
that is cool. Like, okay, so that reminds me, one, this is awesome. Like, this is that tiny arcade. But I wonder with my age, can I even see that anymore? That's but the
you
other
gotta get
thing
those old type glasses.
yeah. No, the other thing is, have you heard of Pico 8?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So it's basically a game platform, and it basically you pay $15 and you have access to this game platform that has games, but it's almost like it's an emulated specific hardware. It has, yeah, hardware constraints specifically, but it's open platform, so or open source, so anyone could develop for it. But you're doing it
Huh.
within the constraints of what it is anyway. So, um, that kind of reminds me of this, and that's actually re- getting me interested in getting something like this. Actually,
I would advise it. You know, again, one of the sort of core tenets behind everything that I do on this channel is encouraging people to kind of to tinker and to get with some of these like, there's so many little like STEM projects and devices that you can mess around with and do some really cool stuff with. So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean that sounds awesome.
yeah. This tiny TV.
Yeah,
What?
the tiny TV is a good, I think intro project because it's kind of all laid out for you as opposed to, um, having to figure out some of that stuff yourself. I it's the same devices that I'm using for wiring up my 1/100 scale Zaku Kai that,
Uh,
you know, and of course, that's one of the things that I would like to, I'll share because everything's on like the Arduino platform, it's all open source.
oh,
If I
nice.
just share the code to you that I'm using to program it, you can upload it to your own device and get the same behaviors. So,
Is Arduino a fork of something, or is it its own? Is it like a
so
Linux based?
it's I I'm probably gonna answer incorrectly because I don't know. I know that Arduino gets compared to Raspberry Pi a lot, even though it's just a microcontroller, it doesn't really, it's not like a computer the way
Yeah,
that, a
you're
Raspberry Pi
you're
is.
you're explaining it right. Yeah, I was just looking at it, and it's more for yeah, interfacing with interactive electronic objects. So, yeah,
Yeah,
you're right, not a full-on OS or anything.
exactly. So, like, you can do things with I think if I understand the relationship correctly, you can achieve the same sorts of effects as an Arduino using a Raspberry Pi, but it has things on it that you don't necessarily need.
Yeah.
Whereas, an Arduino can't do the same things that a Raspberry Pi can.
Although, you know, over this past weekend, I have a Raspberry Pi 3 that I hadn't used in a while, so I went to go fully update it to a RetroPie. It was already in a RetroPie state, but fully update it,
Nice.
and realized now that even Raspberry Pi, in terms of wanting a quick emulation box, is outdated. I wouldn't recommend anyone get a
Really?
RetroPie anymore because you can get they're Linux based. Those handhelds that I've been talking about, like they have
Yeah.
HDMI out and Bluetooth, so that's really all you need. You don't need to actually build a Raspberry Pi anymore because it's more expensive anyway.
Well, there
Um,
you go.
and
And,
it's just so much harder to work with the command line when I'm trying to do certain things that are easier on the Linux based, like Gelos, Jelos, ArcOS. Um, yeah.
so I know that this part has probably been boring to watch, but, what I wanted to do was join up all these faces so that I had, like, basically a box to work with. And one of the things that I'm probably gonna end up doing with this model, because even though it is really good, There's certain things about it that I don't like. For instance, these ends are all like hard, like hard edges. What I'm probably going to end up doing is coming in here in edge mode and adding like a slight chamfer or bevel to them so that we can, it'll look a little bit less rigid. So I'm gonna end up doing that to most of the faces on this model, but for the purposes of getting this square box the right size to fit our screen, I want to work with as simple of a model as we can. So
Yeah, you know what? In looking at some painted, finished versions of that, you could tell there had to have been some slight filing on the edges, unless maybe the way it was printed, it wouldn't be that uh, literal like 90 degree where there's just a little bit of chamfer or whatever.
yeah, because it's always nice to have just like that, just a little softened edge. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I plan to start doing more of when I start 3D printing some masters for action bases. Is For instance, with my logo action base, I wish I had it. It's over in the garage. I was repainting it.
Okay.
Um, when I take like a 3D or when I take like a 2D logo and I extrude it into a 3D object, all of those faces are flat to begin with. And so what I ended up doing was adding that like soft bevel effect so that, especially if you're going to have something in 3D, you kind of want it to be 3D.
Yeah. No, I get you. Like, yeah, there's something about that. Yeah.
So one of the things I'm going to do here is bring up the edge length here. Oh, interesting. So it looks like even though I joined up all of these faces, it still has some edges that were not dissolved. So we need to remove some of these vertices so that we can get accurate edge lengths. Um, dissolve. Tell you what, let's just mass select all of these vertices and dissolve them. And that way we get a nice perfect square on top. So I just measured the depth of the screen with its motherboard, and it is 6.7 millimeters. So what I have discovered with this Tech ABS-like resin is that with the print settings that I use, 2.5 seconds per layer with a 30-second base to make sure that it sticks to the print plate, uh, about 0.03% growth is what is going to allow me to fit the screen in there. So like that much, what you call it? That much clearance or tolerance.
Yeah.
All those words, they all mean the
Dude,
same thing
the
basically.
patience you have to get those minute details down, like, I'm the type where I'm like, "Ah, fuck it," and just but, part of it's experience too, like, once you're really into something, you realize, "Oh, I can overcome anything," and it's like that. Like, I don't consider myself a programmer or a coder or anything, but I was willing to learn command line prompts to enable a bunch of things on these Linux handhelds, so people
See,
have
and I think that that's ultimately where you're going to find enjoyment in these things is it's like you have to find an application for these because I never wanted to study 3D modeling. I never wanted to learn how to do this stuff. But, because I'm now doing it for Gundam stuff, it's now enjoyable for me. And so that's like, you just have to find the twist to put on the thing to make it interesting to you, I guess. Is that
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's kinda like, those life hacks that we've talked about every once in a while, where, like, incorporate something into your yeah, Robert's calling out my, audio. Yeah, there's something going on. I think we figured it out, but don't really
yeah.
have time to fix
Well,
it.
he Adam was very nice, and when he heard how terrible my voice sounds because of this cold, he was like, I will, fall on this sword, and I will make my audio cracklier than your voice." So,
Yeah, that's what I did. That cracklier dial, I just turned
yep,
it up. But
you just
Steven,
turn up the
it's a
crackle.
lie because the voice you have, no one can tell if you're sick.
That's
I
one of
think
the
so.
advantages, I think, of just sounding nasally. So, yeah, this is annoying. I hate when this kinda stuff happens where, like, um, it's like I selected the edge, but it didn't do what I wanted it to do, so we're just gonna select the face instead and use that. But you see that I turned on the edge length mode here, so every time we have a selected edge, it's gonna tell us in millimeters how big that edge is. So what I'm trying to do is get this number, the one that's well, I'm pointing at the screen as if you guys could see, where it says 6.29 millimeters, which I don't even know if you guys can read it. That's impossibly small. But right there in the middle, that length we want to get to 7 millimeters, and that is going to allow for the 3 millimeter clearance that we need for the screen to slide in. Probably from the top, we'll probably create like a some kind of cutout here, or if we're feeling, uh, if we're feeling particularly daring, we can make it so that this entire housing maybe like comes apart. And because you guys know me, I hate when anything is exposed that kind of gives away
Yeah,
the thing.
secrets.
I hate like having battery packs that are connected to my Gundams and things like that. It's like I want to try and hide as much of that stuff, hide the wiring. Um,
What if you created a custom casing, 3D printed a custom casing for the LCD screen?
See, I was thinking about that too because, for instance, on the Tiny Circuits website, they actually have a different kit that I was trying to get my wife into that is it has a tiny LCD screen like this, and it has pH meters that you plug into soil, and it actually is like a plant health monitor.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, it tells you like when the plant needs water, if it needs more light, things like that. But it's all exposed circuitry like this. So I was like, man, someone should 3D print a housing for that so that like
Yeah, I would be curious.
someone
Water, okay,
should.
for water. Interesting. I need that. Every time I've tried gardening, it then just becomes like a, wasteland
Oh yeah. I
after that.
am I've got a brown thumb.
So what I did was I got some mint because mint just continues to grow,
Ah.
and then it just looks like I have a nice green garden. It smells good.
Yeah, hey, that's like a 2 for 1 there. So it looks like these vertices are gonna still continue to cause me problems, so I'm going to dissolve as many of them as we can find until we get a nice clean box to work with. And, come to think of it, what might actually be the best course of action, I could show you guys some of the neat tricks that I used, because that's what this is all about, right? Like, showing you guys how the sausage is made. I can show you some of the neat tricks that I used in order to achieve this perfect snug fit on the kit here is, I had the objects in Blender and then I added modifiers to them in order to get what I wanted. So like, let's say for instance, I'm going to create like a simple cube. Um, let's bring it up here so that you can see it. So like, let's say we wanted to make a 3D model of just this screen. I'm gonna do something very simple. I'm not gonna do anything too crazy with it. So it's 6.7 millimeters deep, 25.9 wide. So let's come in here and on the x-axis, we're just gonna punch in 25.9. On the z-axis, 6.7. And then how tall is it? I'm gonna go ahead and measure it with the SD card because, I wanna make sure that there's clearance for the SD card. So 28.7. 28.7. All right. So this is the size of our screen. Obviously,
Hmm.
much larger than what we have in the cockpit frame here. So what we can actually do and what might help here is let's go ahead and hide some of these
And I'm gonna throw out something real quick because if you were to scale it maybe to what's that size? Size 112, like a 6-inch figure.
oh yeah.
I don't know if then that would be too big, but it would probably be easier to make a custom Camille. with
That's true.
Marvel
To
Legends and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point.
Yes, yeah, especially with, like, Hasbro's, all of their figures they have now, the G.I. Joe, Marvel Legends, I mean, pick a line, there's probably a way to create a easy custom Camille.
Yeah, my little brother is into that,
Oh, the
into, like,
customizing
the
them?
Marvel Legends,
Yeah.
uh, line.
They're
Um,
pretty cool, like, I don't really collect them, and the ones I have are, like, X-Men, but
Naturally.
yeah, uh, I gotta say, Hasbro does pretty good for having, like, kinda cheaper American figures, you know?
I've noticed that their quality has gone up, pretty significantly.
Yeah, especially the new X-Men '97, if you look at the face sculpt of the Wolverine, and they use the real face printing technology,
Oh,
it
that's cool.
yeah, I know, it looks so good.
So you might notice everything here turned blue. It's because I turned on the face orientation mode in Blender, which is nifty for determining what is the inside and what is the outside of an object. So when I deleted the section that was the screen on the old one, um, you see how like it has that exposed chunk there. We need to make sure that we seal that up before we go to print it. Otherwise, it's going to print. Well, it'll just fail. Um, and then what I went ahead and did was copy the exact X coordinates of the center of the cockpit because we are going to paste that onto our new screen cube here and make sure that it's perfectly mathematically aligned. One of the things I did not do was determine exactly what angle these guys are at. Um, so we might have to kind of eyeball this a little bit. Um,
Oh, okay, to match the angle.
yeah, just to get that angle right.
But
Um,
how do you feel? Do you feel that makes it too big, or is it
you
just
know,
right?
I think it is a little large compared to like
Would you notice it? Would people notice it? That's the thing.
that's the question.
I don't think so.
And then the other thing is like, I don't care if it's necessarily well, I do care that it's pretty accurate, but
Yeah.
one of the things about the screen is that like, with the parts of it that are exposed, most of the screen is actually kind of obscured. So I'm thinking with this housing, I'm gonna create like a window that only the screen shows.
Oh, yeah.
So like theoretically, the entire box doesn't have to be this size because
True.
part of it is going to be inside
The
this
bottom
bottom piece.
little, yeah.
So that's where it's like, we can create some overlap here and, you know, hopefully create something that works.
Yeah.
So let's change um, our transform orientations to normal, which just is a fancy way of saying, um, you see how the arrows are here in the center. You can change in Blender how you want to manipulate those things. So, do you want it to be on the global axes, X, Y, and Z? Do you want it to be local to the object? Or do you want it to be based on the normal, which is the direction of the faces? So,
I remember you were showing me something, but the other day when we are doing video game stuff, and just afterwards, my brain, I was like, "Yeah, that just requires multiple just going through the system and everything."
really does. It does. So before we get too far into it, I'm going to show you guys that nifty modifier that I have been using now to create the tolerances that I need. Right. So here in the modifiers tab, we have the solidify modifier, which is typically used, to just to add like more body to a 3D model. And by setting the offset to 1 and changing the thickness of it to 0.03, Now, did you guys see that little subtle growth in the box there? So it's like if I turn it off and turn it back on, it
Hmm,
adds that 0.03% thickness to it. And so then once I have that, I can just cut out whatever I need to from the existing model in order to allow that in order to allow this to fit inside it.
that's cool.
So, clearly we are going to need to increase the width of this piece as well so that the entire thing will fit in there. Um, looks like we can do that just by extending this one side because this side is already pretty clearly covered. Um, oh man, I might just need to hide my cube here for a second so that I can select these faces. And let's go ahead and turn the edge length measurement off because that is getting annoying when you have like a million numbers popping up in your face.
Yeah.
And again, I don't have to be super accurate about this because as long as this is within there, the cutout is going to be however
Yeah.
big the cutout needs to be. So it removes all that guesswork.
Yeah.
And it looks like we've got a little bit peeking out of the bottom here. So we might need to do some modification on this side, but I don't want to lose this unique shape that we've got. So let's see if we can't select a few of these vertices and just kind of pull them downwards. And what we're going to do is turn on our proportional editing. What this is going to do is as we move, it moves all of the faces that are connected to this within a particular radius. And we can affect that radius by using the page up and page down keys. So that allows us to kind of lower this entire section in a way that is smooth and proportional looking. And honestly, I think that it's starting to look better than the original model.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I might even raise this side up a little bit just to give it more of that like perfect roundness. Although it looks like I might just have to keep this screen a little bit higher. All right.
Impressive.
So then let's duplicate this box because now that the old box is gone, we're going to need a new one that actually has everything that's going to be attached to the model.
Yeah.
So let's see. Um, let's hide the original cube, and we're just going to scale this on the x-axis um, a little bit. Maybe align it with these vertices here. Might be a way to. Um, let's tab into edit mode. Get the x value of this here. See, I love to do things mathematically because I am anal about details like that.
Yeah, math
um,
is, I almost feel like knowing math reduces anxiety overall in anything.
generally speaking,
Yeah, there's so many things where I'm having to count money, count things, measure things, and then I'm having to do the math. I'm like, "I'm not too sure." Yeah.
and then I'm just gonna align this with that button, and we'll call it good. So now oh, you know what I should do? Let's go ahead and I'm going to measure the exact size of the screen without the, like I said, that clear space on it. So it's 16.7 millimeters tall and 24.1 wide. So what we're going to do is hit the I key to inset a face on this. And this is where we're going to be cutting out our little window. Um, let's
Hmm.
get our edge lengths showing again. Because like I said, it's, oh man. So 24.1 wide. So let's scale on the x-axis until we have 24.1 millimeters wide, and then we're going to scale on the z-axis until it is 16.7. There we go. Ooh, that turned out ugly. I need to change my transform orientation here. See, and that's annoying too when you like forget to change some of these things.
Oh,
And so that is our screen
so that's the
essentially.
screen size then. Okay. I guess that makes sense with the considering the bezels.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and to be honest, it doesn't look like seeing it like that with the screen, it doesn't even look much different than the original.
Yeah, and that's I was hoping that it would have that that sort of effect.
Yeah.
And let's just go ahead and extrude that through. We'll see if this crazy plan works because essentially I'm going to have to 3D print it in such a way that that window is just open. Um, so let's grab this face and get the Y value of that because we are going to need to set this Y value equal to that minus 3. Whoa, minus 3. Maybe it was plus 3. Alright. So now we can take this cube and we're going to add a modifier to it, which is a Boolean, which is how we cut things out. And we will use the other cube to basically cut the hole that we need out of it. Although it looks like I need to give it a little bit more clearance on the front end. Um, there we go.
Nice.
So that represents the box with which we are going to fit our screen inside.
And I forgot, did you say that you're gonna print it where it's hollow or cut it yourself after you print it?
I'm going to print it so that it's hollow so that we can just slide the thing
Oh,
right
yeah.
in.
Nice.
Um, now we are going to have to, I guess, create the channel where I'm going to feed through. I'm thinking the microphone I can install right here where this, I guess, what would be like a keyboard. I don't know what.
Yeah,
It,
what would that be?
I'm trying to like reason out like what exactly are some of these devices that Camille would be using in the cockpit. Like, you know, we've got a few hotkeys over here, I guess. There's a couple buttons here, but like,
It
you know,
almost
what
looks
if
like
you wanted
what
to
you're
send a text
printing,
message?
but yeah, but, Yeah, I'm looking at some other references, and it almost looks like it's just filler, gadgets. But there's gotta be something, you know? Or it looks like the one on the if you're sitting in the cockpit on the left, rectangle thing is it's like just a big red thing. Maybe it just lights up red when something happens.
Oh, interesting. Oh, there we go. That'll give us a little bit more depth. And so now we should have the ability to I'm gonna duplicate this in case it's not done correctly, but if we apply our Boolean here, select this, there we go.
Voila.
That would be the housing for our screen. And I have a hole in the top that I can just kind of drop it in.
That's impressive. Yeah, especially if you can just drop it in from the top. Easy if you needed to remove it to press something or
Exactly.
troubleshoot.
And now let's this would be a little concerning, I think. We probably don't want a giant face kind of jutting up into the where the screen is supposed to be. Um, and then, yeah, we're gonna wanna get rid of some of these overlapping faces you see. This one's not so bad, like, I don't think that that's gonna be an issue. Ooh, but this is a problem. I didn't realize that there's, like, a little divot cut out of this side, but we can address that later. So let's hide our housing here, and let's select these faces and seal them up so that I think that's looking partially correct. It definitely created, some n-gons, which
Oh, and guns.
yeah, which is not by, despite what popular belief would tell you, it is not a character from Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Um,
It was like the evil Egon.
yeah. So n-gons are, polygons in Blender that have more than 4 vertexes, so, like, 5 six-sided shapes, things like that.
Mm.
The reason that those create problems, and you know what? I can even illustrate it for you, is, for instance, we have an n-gon right here. It is this face, right? Because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vertices. The reason that this is a problem is because if I were to take this one random vertex and move it up, now we have an irregular face because instead of it being a flat plane,
Oh, wow.
it's got too many points to calculate out. So if I were to let's do that. So one of the things that you have to do when you have faces like this, you come up to face here, triangulate faces, and you see that it created triangles
But
from
how did you see that? Is it because on that little manipulator, you can see that there's another vertice?
yeah, so, like,
Ju Oh,
because
just the
yeah,
line is showing that.
right,
Okay.
yeah, if there's a like, a random dot in the middle
The
of a face
shape.
like that,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a bad time.
That sounds super fundamental, I think, to just understanding manipulating these surfaces. Like, just to have that in mind. Is this an Engon?
Exactly, and so see, here you go. Because I just selected all of these different faces and created one giant face out of it, you might think, "Oh, that's just a square. Like, there's no problem with a square, right?" But if we go into vertex select mode, we see that we have these, like, free floating vertices, and when we when we start messing with it, it can mess with the shape of that square so that it's no longer a square. And so again, you go back into face mode, select the face, triangulate faces, and it's going to connect all of those
Oh, smart.
vertices in order to make sure that you have, some clean looking, uh, 3D models.
And it's okay that they're there, just more of if you're gonna manipulate it, you gotta keep that in mind.
Exactly. Now it can be helpful to have, like, for instance, it was a lot easier for me to do that, to just create one face and then triangulate it afterwards, than it would have been for me to manually, like, topologize it and say, like, "Okay, I'm gonna select this face and connect those ones. I'm gonna select this face and this face and connect those ones." It's like,
Hmm,
"No, I'm just gonna close the whole thing up." And so now you see that the entire model's blue. That means we don't have any open models. Everything is solid again. Um,
impressive.
and so now we can start. I mean, we have a couple minutes left in the stream, but I think that it's enough time that we can create the housing for our microphone,
Speaker?
speaker, the audio part,
Checking.
the
Yeah, yeah,
sound maker.
microphones. Oh, hey, we know microphones. Maybe you could podcast from that cockpit.
Now that would be pretty freaking sweet. I don't know if an Arduino could do that. We might need a Raspberry Pi, but that might be the next level
Yeah.
of Gundam customization here that
Wait
we
a minute.
need to.
We just need to make our offices into cockpits. I mean,
I
you can do
mean,
it. You 3D print, right? Just 3D print it.
yeah, I'm basically thinking this is what we need to do is just 3D print my own. Uh, did I not add the cube? Thought I added a cube. Am I still in edit mode? Is that the problem? Ugh, and I still have the edge lengths turned on, which makes everything all messy.
Oh, and there's
So,
an orange spot, but I don't know if that matters where it's at right now because you're not in
yeah, I saw that down there. Okay, so that's
Oh.
one of the buttons on the side,
Okay.
but that is a concern because, like, this button obviously is closed up, but this
Oh,
one was
yeah.
not. But one of the things, and this is another trick that I do before I 3D print anything, is like, you're gonna have like some overlapping geometry like this where it's like things that are jutting into each other. And when you try to 3D print it, the 3D printer doesn't know that you're not supposed to have interior geometry like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I always recommend doing is there is another modifier. Shocker. Blender has a modifier for everything basically. Um, so like let's select all of these pieces, right? And then if we were to join them up into one mesh, you can add what is called a remesh modifier. And what that does is it's like having a sphere around your model with a bunch of ray casts going in on it and determining what the outside of the model is. So like for instance, you look at the interior of this model now, well, let's get rid of this piece so that that's not sitting in there. You look at the interior of this model and it's all just one piece, right? If I were to turn that modifier off and we go inside that model, you see that we have like all these overlapping and
Oh, yeah.
uh, intersecting geometry. That's going to confuse the 3D printer. So you apply that remesh modifier and it removes all of that interior geometry. Um,
And I guess and this is doing it in context to knowing this is about the interior and not that outer you were talking about where it can kind of read and see.
exactly. So and that's where, like I said, it's basically projecting, raycasts in on itself to
Yeah.
determine what is the outside.
I mean, even right there, it looks like what you see when LiDAR scans something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect comparison there. Now, of course, the voxel size of the modifier, I'm not going to mess with it too much because if I mess with it, it typically crashes Blender. So I don't want
Oh,
to do that on stream. But um, currently, the voxel size, so the individual squares of the model are 0.1 millimeter. I can reduce that. Typically, I like to get it around 1/100th of a millimeter, and that's gonna clean up all these details so that it doesn't look as, blocky.
yeah.
Because that I mean, obviously, the raw 3D model looks crisp and
But it's interesting because it goes back to what you started with, where it's like the straight edges don't always, look right. Sometimes you want that little chamfer or
yeah.
bevel or yeah.
Yeah, I think that that helps, kind of sell the illusion a little bit better.
Yeah, because even that other view we were seeing with the thing on, it almost looked like it was just kinda like like a muddy interpretation of detail, you know?
Yeah, the closest approximation of detail that we could get. Oh, I see what I must have done. I must have added that cube in edit mode. So if I were to do this, nope. Was it this piece? Where did I put that cube and why is it floating there?
Reminds me of that movie, I think it's called The Cube? The Cube? Did you ever see that?
That's the horror movie with like the maze.
People wake up in a cube? Yeah, like, I think I've seen the first, but I think there's more of them.
How can you perfect that? I mean, like the
I'll have to
the
check it
first
out.
movie's fine. You don't need a sequel.
Yeah, but they do that with horror movies, they make all those sequels, which, you know, I might need to go I remember when Cube first came out, I watched that over and over.
It was pretty cool. Um,
Oh, and Autonomous, I like that he said his mind went to Hellraiser, which was what I first went to. I first went to Hellraiser, but then it's like, well, then I gotta what is that called? The Lampercham? I don't know, there's a word for the box. It's
oh
like a
yeah.
French word. I'm sure Autonomous would correct me, but
But yeah, I figure I won't
enhanced
get too,
configuration.
into the weeds with the audio playing portion of the model. But yeah, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a, you know, an idea of what I do when I take, like an existing 3D model and try to, engineer the ability to combine it with existing physical objects.
And
Um,
I think that's the best not I shouldn't say the best. I think that's like the ultimate creator's version of what to do with their 3D files. It's like, here's something I made, and then people taking it and like, okay, I'm gonna further modify this and do this. And I I think that's more the intention around that stuff. Yeah, it's cool to have a version of something you can print and paint, but to add on top of it is really cool.
yeah, you always want to keep pushing the envelope, and
Yep.
yeah, like you mentioned, because this is going to be something that has to be printed in parts anyway. Why not take some of those panels and things that would normally be printed in the same material, if I print those in, like, a clear resin and turn them
Yes.
into little screens where we have, like, some LEDs and things going
Yes.
on, pop some of these little guys, the LED bar lights.
Yeah, dude, there's so much you can do with this cockpit, I think, in terms of electronics and lighting, like adding all the different disciplines you've learned.
I think so too, and hopefully, I'm gonna obviously make a video with the finished product, I should say, just like all of my other projects that we start on stream, and then now
Hey,
this one I'm
hey,
actually really committed to because I really want to I've yet to complete anything using some of these tiny circuits, like the circuit boards,
mhm.
and I really do want to push the envelope with those things, and like I said, start sharing the code that I'm putting on them. Maybe even, like, if you wanted to buy one pre-wired and everything, I'll build it for you, like, 3D print it and ship you a Camille.
Wow, that's good, definitely. Yeah, but yeah, the next step is the Camille. That would be a fun custom.
Yeah.
I would love to help you with that. Like, put our heads together. How can we build a custom Camille action figure?
Yeah, that's I have the 3D model, so we can start doing that. I don't know if the answer is to create the entire thing from scratch or to just print the head and put it, like, on an existing pilot body,
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I
just to
mean,
kind
well,
of
I don't
cut.
know. I think
Yeah,
that's the first step, and then from there, maybe we kinda see how it goes.
for sure. But yeah, that about wraps it up for today. I'm gonna give my voice a break here, but if you have not gotten your fill of Gundam yet today, and you haven't seen Adam's video about the Cold District GM, check that out. Links down in the description.
Thank you.
Man, you said it as well. It's my favorite GM design, like
Yeah. It
hands
wasn't
down.
until I held it in my hands and manipulated, I'm like, "Wait a minute, this thing is top tier."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, sure is. Well, cool.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. Thank you, Adam, for helping me out with this
No
little
problem.
little passion project that I've got going on. Is there anything that I'm forgetting to announce? If you haven't, check out Zeke New York over on Instagram. They have a new
Oh,
giveaway going
new
for
giveaway.
April, so there's that. Um, we are 20 subscribers away from 4,000, which means that I'm gonna have a giveaway, uh,
Oh,
I guess shortly here. So, tell your friends about it because
yeah.
yeah, I'm really excited about this particular giveaway because there's going to be some fabulous prizes involved, and I get to test out some new toys that I'm looking forward to showing off. But until then, catch the Gundam Explained show tomorrow, and we will see
Yep.
you next week.
See you guys later.